People are in the waiting room.
Good.
I welcome everybody that's here and anyone that's online. My name is Nathan Lawrence, Senior Planner with the City of Westminster. Thanks. The main purpose of this meeting is for the applicant and their team to familiarize you all with their project proposal, your input. We're at a very early stage in the project to hear your input in order to produce a better product in the end for our community. I'll go through the agenda. After going through the agenda, I'll talk about the development review process, just give you a brief overview of where we are and where we're headed. Then the applicant will go through their presentation again, just giving you an overview of their project at a high level. And then we will wrap up with questions and comments. And just a reminder, we are recording the presentation. It will be uploaded to YouTube within a few days. So I'll segue over to Jordan with the applicant team. If you want to introduce yourself, and I'll change slides.
Thanks. My name is Jordan Zielinski. I'm a Director of Development for St. Charles Town Company. Joining me today are Jason Batista. He's a development partner, and Darren Gromick in the back. He's our Chief Financial Officer. We are 3 of the 4 owners of the actual project. If you don't know St. Charles, we're celebrating our 30th year in business. We've been all Denver based. All of our projects are in the Denver metropolitan area. Started out in downtown Denver doing historic adaptive reuse, and for the last 2 decades we have gotten into multifamily and workforce housing. So we're here today talking to you about our project Overlook at Uplands. Nathan, did you want to?
Yeah, I'll go through
that back.
Sorry, I'm stuck right over you. So where we are now, the Uplands rezoning and preliminary development plan was approved in January of 22. So now we're working through the official development plan for this portion of that project. As I've said, we've gone through 1 staff review and we're at the neighborhood meeting section right now. So after we incorporate your input from tonight's meeting, we'll be doing more reviews until all of codes and regulations are satisfied. And then at that point, which is unique to this ODP and other ODPs in the Uplands area, is that we will go back to planning commission and then to council, who will vote to approve or not approve the ODP. If it is approved, then we will be able to go forward with the applicant team, and they'll be able to submit their civil and drawings and building permit sets, which will be reviewed until all codes and criteria are met. And once that's approved, then they can build their project. Go back to the applicant.
So before we get into it, I'd just like to say, we sort of view this as an opportunity to get feedback from you on the built environment. We'll go through some of that shortly. We've got our architects from KTPY and then our civil engineers. Should you have any questions about that. And to give you an example of some of the feedback we've incorporated on previous projects from the community. We did another project in Westminster where after a couple of meetings, it was made clear to us that we wanted a little bit more privacy between one of our developments and the neighboring uses. So we put up a tree screen. Other projects that we've done such things as hawk lights for community crossings, at key points in a community for safe pedestrian crossings across a road. We've done public plazas, little mini parks. So, I think the conversation can kind of go anywhere. So if you have ideas, once you look at our site plan, whether it's in this meeting or following this meeting, we'll have some contact information for you to submit ideas to or feedback or questions. So if you're not familiar with Uplands is roughly the 230 acres. They're at between 84th and 88th along Federal on both sides. This project in particular is on the east side of Federal, basically south of 88th. And it's a 13.77 acre site. Next slide, please. It's a 13.77 acre site, of which roughly 9.7 are developable. There's a 3 acre public land dedication. There are 7 residential buildings, 1 clubhouse, 247 units. Those are spread out between 1s, 2s, and 3 bedrooms, as you see up there. And the parking is at the city required, which is 1.54 to 1. That translates to 381 spaces for the 247 units. There is a clubhouse island, and on that island, we've kind of got a lot of the amenities for the project contained. That includes a typical clubhouse, fitness, pool, splash pad for kids, a fairly significant playground and sport court, and then some of the typical amenities that you would see in a multifamily clubhouse structure. We do have on-site management. They are, for a project of this size, we would typically have about 4.5 full-time equivalents, split between 2.5 on management and leasing, and another 2 strictly dedicated to maintenance. There are multiple barbecue gathering seating areas throughout the project, including on the amenity island, and then in some of the courtyards that you'll see in between some of the buildings. We've got some greenways that encourages resident gathering and that kind of thing. We also have a regional stormwater detention facility for all of parcel C. So parcel C is kind of like a little horseshoe, and our site will be detaining all of the stormwater and releasing that for the entirety of the parcel C. Some of the public improvements, and this is really an area where I do think we can, accommodate comments, suggestions. The public improvements along Clay Street and 88th Street. So currently, we are planning a 10-foot multi-use trail that goes north from the southern extent of the property line and connects to 88th Avenue and the Highland Hills open space. And then also on 88th, 88th will be extended to the eastern extent of our property line. And the current design is for a wraparound trailhead with parking there. And if you haven't accessed Highland Hills before, the access currently is a little bit sketchy. It's kind of like a old dirt trail, but there's frisbee golf in there, and that leads to 3 other parks. There's a fishing pond, so there's some cool stuff that we can connect to via Highland Hills. Next slide, please. The actual parcel is planning area C2, in case you'd like to look it up. We have some materials available should you like to review them. That includes the Uplands preliminary development plan, which was approved by City Council in February or March of 22. And like Nathan said, the use at this site is a pre-approved use. It's a permitted use. Nathan, I'd have to go back and look, but I believe the overall density on parcel C is now projected to be, fairly significantly less than the original Uplands was planning for. I believe.
I'm
Don't
not
quote me
sure.
on that.
I wasn't involved in the original
Okay.
PDP process.
So that for our parcel, there's no other uses being pursued. So we'll have the 247 units on the approximately 10 acres, and then there will be 3 acres of city open space, and what they do with that. I don't know yet. They may have a long-term plan for it. The on-site management leasing that we previously mentioned, and then we typically utilize a permit parking system. So our parking consists of a mix of tuck under garages that are underneath buildings on the first floor. Carports, our carports will have solar panels on top of them, and then surface parking. So we have a little bit of everything. We use the permit system to really enforce, one, or if there are 2 vehicles per household, 2 vehicles per household, as the case may be. Next slide, please. Some of the other public improvements that you will see as a part of this project are extensions of Decatur Street and Clay Street from their existing terminations up to 88th Avenue. And then, like I previously mentioned, the extension of 88th Avenue to the eastern extent of the property line you see here, which is the green pond in the upper right corner. So this is our site plan. We have modified this slightly from the rendered version that you see here. The only change is that we brought two of these buildings to kind of stagger that street edge. Two of those buildings are coming out now. And you'll see kind of a north-south orientation for many of these buildings. We have one building type that you see, the typical rectangle building. And then a second building type, which is a crescent shaped building that has a one-story step down along the edges. The amenity island is in the middle. You can see where the clubhouse and the pool are. That's really intentional. It's centered on the site. Also, for leasing purposes, it's located and has immediate visibility from one of the project entrances. The amenities are also kind of screened within the site. So, you know, a big thing that we're sensitive to is as much as the site will allow and as possible is really locating those amenities, some of the noisier parts of that, like a pool, interior to the site, which this is. That's about it on the site plan. You can sort of see trees. We have some pretty generous setbacks from the approved Uplands PDP. So along Clay Street, we've got basically a three-layer system of tree screening. So the existing condominiums down here, they should, and you'll see this in one of the renderings. They should be fairly well screened from a new three-story building. Along the southeast and north edges, we also have very generous plantings. Our trees exceed the or are proposed to exceed the city minimums by quite a bit, as well as the shrub plantings. Next slide.
What is that parcel on the upper left?
Go back. This?
Yep.
That's the public land dedication. So that will be permanent city open space. This is a rendering from the amenity island, which is in the middle of the site looking southeast. That is that crescent shaped building that you saw, as I indicated earlier, as a one-story down along each edge of the building. And I'll let KTGY, the architect, come in here shortly to talk about the architecture, but you know, the architecture is I think a combination of farmhouse and modern. I don't want to say modern farmhouse because I think it's an overused term, but you know, we've really, I think, done a good job of breaking up the roof lines so you don't see a lot of monotony, big long, you know, 100, 300 foot roof lines. Our project does not have that. It's broken up very nicely in the vertical plane and the horizontal plane. I'll let John, if you want to come up here after we look at this next rendering, maybe you can explain that. Next slide. This is the view from the existing condominiums to the east, to the west, looking east. As I mentioned before, there's a multi-layered tree screen, and it involves some larger deciduous trees, some larger evergreen trees, and then some smaller ornamental trees closer to the building. Next slide. That's the last slide. John, you want to talk about the architecture a little bit more?
Yeah. Hi, I'm John Green. I'm with KTGY. We're an architecture firm in Denver, Colorado. A couple of items on the site. Because just a quick dwelling unit density count on the site, we are roughly sitting at 20 units per acre. With that, the community, we wanted to make sure that the design and materials in the building itself kind of were upscale and for the tenants that are providing. We know, I'm sure you all know this is an affordable project, right? With that though, when you have higher quality materials, a better design, people take pride in their and try to gain some ownership in their space. I think with the amenity spaces and the proximity to the streets and the setbacks, it is a good place for people to, you know, have a better quality of life and enjoy the surrounding community. The materials we're using will be kind of a ledge stone. I think Westminster has a lot of ledge stone on single family residential. So we're kind of incorporate that. The majority of the white, can you go back to the renderings real quick? This is board and batten, again, a very common product in Colorado. That is the farmhouse look. With this, the city of Westminster has, some design guidelines that help break down the mass and keep within a residential feel. So our roof lines, like Jordan said, the goal here is break those up at the end, create the hip roofs that you commonly see in the neighborhoods in a single family residential. And then try to make the scale of the buildings feel pedestrian. With that, you can see on the corners and this element here with the stone and the entryways into this building. So each building has a stairwell and each stairwell has 10 units on that. With that, let's break that down and try to make it feel as residential and single family as possible with the 3-story building.
Yeah, and just to interject real quick. It's a 3-story walk-up product, and what you're probably used to seeing are those big breezeways that are open with the bright lights in them. We have completely enclosed breezeways with secure access entry. So you won't see any of those bright lights, kind of the floodlights shining through.
So for example, what Jordan's saying, this is the entry to the building. This is a perspective off Clay Street. Right now we have roughly a 20 to 40 foot setback from Clay Street. This is undeveloped, correct? Yep. And then directly to the north, we have a setback of roughly 50 feet. But again, this isn't a typical 3-story walk-up. Each unit has an outdoor space where tenants can, enjoy the Colorado indoor-outdoor spaces. And again, the windows themselves, they'll be vinyl. And the goal here is to try to fit into the community and make it feel pedestrian scale and single family as possible.
Are these market rate apartments?
It's workforce housing, so.
I don't know what that means. You said affordable housing, so it's not market rate. How much is this stuff gonna cost to live in?
It's not market rate. This product will serve households earning 40%, 50%, 60%, and 70% of area median income.
Okay, so is government financing being used in the construction of these units?
So it's part of the tax credit program.
It's what?
It's part of the tax credit program. It's called a low-income housing tax credit, if you're familiar with it.
I'm not. What entity or agency does it come from?
So it's an IRS program. And it's
IRS.
It's administered by the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority. There is no government, this or that. It's a private loan in exchange for the project restricting rents to households earning those incomes for long term. We generate tax credits, which we syndicate as equity to finance the project. And I'd be happy to send you a cheat sheet or
Sure.
like a FAQ
Sure.
following the meeting if that would be helpful for
It
you.
would be.
We can also send, a table of incomes if you'd like to know who will live here. It's a family of 4 earning roughly $74,000 per year. That's the 60%. That would be the average income, the average household family person who would live at Overlook at Uplands. But we can send you the whole table. You can see all that breakdown.
That'd be helpful, thank you.
How come you don't call it what it is, subsidized housing?
Because it's not subsidized housing. Subsidized housing is typically, referred to as Section 8 housing. Yeah, Section 8 housing was abolished, at least the legacy program of it was abolished in the 1980s and replaced with the Section 42 program in 1986. It's fundamentally different than the Section 8 program. The Section 8 program subsidized housing, quote unquote. A person would get, if they made $5 a month and they pay 30% of that, so they pay $1 in rent, and the government would subsidize the rest. That's not how this works. The folks who live in these apartments, they have jobs. They have to qualify. They have to have an income to pay that rent. The rent for a 1-bedroom, 60% average income in Denver right now, if you can believe it, is about $1,475. So a 1-bedroom affordable apartment is $1,400. a month. And that has about a 25% discount to the actual market. Unit. And that discount goes up as more bedrooms are added to the unit size.
I've got to say that site plan looks like a storage unit, site plan, and that's kind of what this reminds me of, is a storage unit for people. You know, I know this was all approved by the current city council, which I have a real problem with. But theoretically, affordable housing was supposed to mix the housing units with the market rate housing, not sequester it all together in a basically kind of tenement type situation, which is what the other one on Federal is. It's got a tenement type feel. John was just telling me it's got a high rate of crime in the city, apparently.
Talking St. Mark's development
Yeah.
at 97.
And this kind of place where you bring low-income people all together without mixing them in with people with different income levels tends to be a breeding ground for crime. And even if the apartments or whatever are nice enough, the very fact that it's its own entity for low income breeds its own problems. And this was not really what I think most of us in Westminster had in mind by affordable housing, is section off a place with a site plan that looks like a storage unit site plan and put all the people there who have problems with housing. And so, I mean, I know you guys are just following city council's allowances, but it disgusts me that city council allowed this crap to happen. And I do not think it's good for the community to approach affordable housing in this way.
Well, I can tell you that there's affordable housing everywhere.
Yeah, I
I'd be
know,
happy
and
to
some
share,
places actually incorporated in with a market rate housing. They do not section it off as a special place that's, 25 units to the acre, mostly parking lots. I mean, this looks like a parking lot with storage units on it. I'm sorry. You can have all the trees along the perimeter that you want, but, and the nice rendering from the one place, the nice clubhouse area, but the reality is it looks like a parking lot with buildings on it. And, I can see it's gonna be similar to the other project there on Federal, as far as, the pride that people have. When people know they're being put into a stigmatized area, it makes a difference. And this was not supposed to be what the affordable housing was supposed to be in Uplands and Westminster. These areas where it's like, yeah, that's where the poor people are, that's where the crime is. That's where it's basically subsidized housing, whatever you want to call it. It's subsidized housing. And that's the feel it has.
If you could go back to the site plan real quick, we just address a couple of her concerns. So you mentioned it feels like a public storage unit.
Yeah.
It meets the minimum parking requirements for the city. So that, if you're concerned about that kind of thing,
No,
you
that's not what I'm-
might go to city council and offer suggestions to reduce parking
Yeah, I've got a
requirements.
few suggestions for city council,
Well,
that's for sure.
We've also got, down the middle here, we have 2 garden courtyards. They're not small, they're very large. That's incredible green space for a multifamily project. And as you drive around town, not a lot of multifamily properties have that kind of green space. So we really like that component of it. You'll notice there are kind of gazebo barbecue areas right there on the west end of those 2 courtyards. We've actually moved those to the east end. So that folks aren't gathering kind of on the public edge next to the existing condominiums. So, we really like this kind of site plan. As I mentioned, we have large setbacks all around. So there's generous landscaping all around the site. We have generous landscaping within the site. This is Dan, I believe it's a 14-foot Another 14-foot garden view with the equivalent of lush Colorado landscaping. So, I think given the site constraints, we've done our very best and been very cognizant of some of the things that you're saying and have done our best to turn it into a great looking community.
Is the property to the east, is that the trailer park?
There is a mobile home park to the east. And that is the last parcel of the city of Westminster. Any other questions, comments, ideas for improvement?
88th just will be 2 lanes up to the east side of your property.
I believe so. Dan, do you know if those have bike lanes and multi, or if
Yeah, the bike lanes taper off at Clay Street, and then it kind of tapers down to 2 lanes, and then it'll be a roundabout. I have it on my screen here. I don't know if we can get it up there anyway.
Curb gutter and sidewalks
It's curb gutter and the trail. And
on both sides of 88th.
it's trail on the south. I don't know if there's no sidewalk proposed anymore at this time,
like curb and gutter on
but
the
curb and gutter all the way.
and the ADA termination is essentially a loop
Straight
with parking in.
as it comes in, that should.
Yeah, it's mainly straight and then loops.
What are y'all gonna do about traffic for construction? I mean, with the school going down 84th, it's already hard, because I live in the condos over there, it's already hard to get through. And with construction traffic, y'all gonna extend the roads before you start building? Or,
I think the public infrastructure piece of it, so there's already 2 different ways, 2 road accesses into
yeah, but
one.
through
To your
the top,
point,
when
through the
schools get
condominium.
out, there's really only one way.
Yep.
really.
So the improvements you see here, the extension of 88th, the extension of Decatur and Clay are proposed, so all that site work will be happening at the site work for the residential structures and then the site work for the streets will all be happening at the same time.
That's gonna be one big of a mess. I'm actually a traffic technician. See, in Northland, they have a big project and the 120th is a total mess. And it's gonna be just like it. You're gonna have people call all the time, hey, we can't get through, we can't. It's gonna be a total mess.
Yeah, in terms of construction parking, that kind of thing, we can look at and we can, I think, work with the city. Keith Klein, the transportation engineer, is not here tonight, but I think we can work with him to limit where construction access happens. For example, maybe it only happens on 88. And maybe they're utilizing the existing dirt access paths to then park on that big parcel, the acre parcel. To keep construction parking off of the street, off of the public right away. I think that would be helpful and something we can definitely comment. Go ahead.
Who's doing the infrastructure improvements and who's paying for that,
Yeah.
and including downstream?
Yeah, right.
We're not sure who will be doing it, which subcontractor.
But it
yet,
won't be you guys.
But St. Charles Town Company and the entity that owns that project will be responsible for all of those horizontal road improvements.
I'm talking water and sewer, that road, water and sewer.
St. Charles Town Company and our project entity will be responsible for all the water improvements to serve that. And
But
any
you're not
other,
paying for it?
yes, we are paying for it, all of it, 100% of it.
When are the road improvements starting?
Well, if the project is to move forward through planning commission and city council and is approved, the current schedule has a groundbreaking happening sometime late in the first quarter of next year. That's a moving target all of the time, but
Sure.
that's
Good enough.
schedule. Yep, another 10 trying to get in. Any other questions or?
I thought it's just a general comment. It would have been nice if you people could have this meeting closer to the neighborhood where this development's happening. There are several schools in the area. In fact, I drove by 2 on the way here and there's nothing going on at Flynn Elementary.
I actually, Nathan and I have some correspondence on this. I called, I think 7 or 8 places, including Westminster Public Schools, and just could not get a date in the near term for
Like I said,
like elementary.
I drove by two of them on the way here and there was no events going on.
Yeah,
Furthermore, doesn't St. Charles or St. Mark's Church have a meeting room up there that could have been utilized?
they do, however, the number of addresses we had to notify, we had over 1,000 addresses to notify. So neither one of those spaces would have had enough. Like the St. Mark's Clubhouse would not have had
So
enough space.
you pick a room that has a maximum occupancy of 32 people. That's more than 5 miles away from this community.
It's, it's the best that we could get, sir.
So
We could do it over again.
That's what
if
this
we had more
community
time
is
to plan.
supposed to expect from you moving forward with this project. This is an example of the best you can do. If I lived anywhere near there, I would be wondering.
This is the venue, the closest venue that was available. Oh, sorry that it wasn't closer. We did offer to arrange transportation for anybody who needed it. I don't know if that message got through to you, but we did offer.
Certainly didn't, but again, this is, you know, 5.5, 6 miles from the Shaw Heights neighborhood where this development's going to happen.
Okay. I'm glad you were able to attend. Appreciate your comments, and if we are to have another community meeting, we'll again do our best to. Shaw Elementary is right there. Westminster Public Schools just did not have the staffing to make those facilities available.
Crown Point.
Not all.
And I talked to the people at Crown Point last week. That's not what I was told.
Westminster Public Schools has a facility rental. I'm happy to call them. That's who I spoke with.
You have any other questions? Contact.
What did you say the number of parking spots was?
381.
And again, it looks like, I mean, the buildings, there's 4 buildings. And the parking really should be closer to the buildings rather than 4 buildings right there and then the parking. I mean, again, the whole site plan is. Just glares at me as like storage unit park, you know, placement. But in reality, I mean, to serve the people better. If this is to go through, which I find abhorrent in the first place, but the parking should actually be closer to the units versus all the units together in the parking to the south. I mean, that doesn't seem right.
So it may be hard to see on this whiteboard, but there is parking in each one of these buildings. There's under building, under unit parking. So there are garages, for example, that is with. And then we've also made a site plan change based on staff comments from the first round of the ODP, the official development plan submittal. And we have an additional tranche of parking along that building edge, closer to those buildings, to your point.
How many units will be ADA and how many handicap spots are you putting in for that number of units?
We're still working through that. We have several differing accessibility requirements. We believe that will be subjected to, I'm gonna get it wrong, UFAS, but it's actually a 10% accessible unit and parking space, and an additional 4% hearing and visually impaired, which is incredibly generous. The code required minimums are 2% for accessible. There are no requirements for hearing and visually impaired.
Worth mentioning that along the East Crescent building doesn't have the parking interior to it, which is why there's more surface parking shown.
That's right. The Crescent building on the far east side of the site does not have those tuck-under garages. So that's why you see more parking along that edge.
Will these units all be sprinklered, fire sprinklered?
They will, yes. Well, we've got some contact information here. Nathan, this will be available probably early next week.
Yeah, I'll
to the
go ahead.
YouTube channel.
Yeah, I'll post a recording of this if any of you all want to watch it again. If you have any thoughts or comments that come up after or that you didn't say tonight, feel free to email me. My email is up there. I can be your sort of main point of contact on this. And we have some links there as well. But if you go to our development resources page, you'll be able to find our uploads there as well.
And I'm happy to grab your email address after the meeting.
Yes.
To send you some information, but if you would like any information whatsoever, housing@stcharlestown.com. That comes to our company, we all monitor that, and we can put together some answers for your questions or start some dialogue about, comments of improvement or otherwise that you may have.
I do have one more question, being how you were involved with the St. Mark's development up there in Federal. When that was all approved, there was an agreement between your company and the city that they would open up Green Court between 96 to 97 for the public safety of that left in, left out on Federal. That never happened. Now the cities, the taxpayers are now funding that to the tune of $1.4 million, $1.3 million. How can we be assured that, again, that there's not going to be broken promises?
I can't speak directly to Green Court, but and Molly, you may know better, but the economic development folks had been working with the developer to finish the rest of that townhome project on the east and west side of Green Court. That developer pulled out at some point, and
that was long before.
No, it's fairly recent. So the city sold the land to the Urban Land Conservancy, and they were working with the developer to actually build the rest of those townhomes. That developer who was going to build those townhomes pulled out of that project, and you'd have to ask economic development.
But again, your company agreed to open that up for the public safety. Never happened.
I think that the specific language was that the city would identify funding for Green Court to finish that townhome project. There was never discussion about St. Charles Town Company funding the opening of Green Court. We did a traffic study. It did not warrant or need the opening of Green Court. It was more so just a community measure for the long term to improve that general area. We did install in response to community feedback for cars going too fast on 7th Avenue. We did install a narrow pedestrian crossing.
You can't speak on that street anyway because there's so much off-street parking. It wouldn't be possible to speed down that street.
Well, I'd
You're
be happy
talking
to
to somebody that lives in that neighborhood. I know what I'm talking about, and I know what I'm talking about Green Court. So.
But I'd be happy to follow up with economic development and get you a status update on Green Court if you'd like.
The city's already got a contract out for $1.3 million of taxpayer dollars.
Anything else?
Great, well, thank you all. I appreciate you all coming tonight. Again, some contact info up here. I'll just leave it up until we all leave. And then conclude our meeting. Thanks again.
Thank you.